Welcome. I'm Crystal Cotto Sullivan, your host of Journey to Inner Practical Wisdom. Why practical? Here I go again. How else do we acquire wisdom but from our practical engagement in life, our awareness of what's happening around us, to us, and between ourselves and others on all levels: physical, spiritual, psychic, soulful, and emotional levels. Today, Jillian, Joanne, and I will talk about two books: Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief by David Keller. I'll show you that right away. And it's published in 2019 by Scribner. And How We Live is How We Die by Pema Chodron, published in 2023 by Shambhala Publications. So let's begin our conversations.
Good morning, ladies.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Well, lovely that we're together again. So we have two books today, and who wants to begin? I think, Joanne, you chose Keller's book.
Kessler. Yeah.
Kessler.
Kessler.
Yeah.
David Kessler. Yeah, I did. Part of the reason that I chose the book was that I was on a deep journey of grieving the death of my 18-year-old granddaughter. And we had been on in a sense, a grieving journey for 10 years from the time that she was diagnosed with her condition. And through that process, it caused me to search, of course. And when I'm searching, I go to books. They're my source of inspiration, my source of knowledge. And so I was really drawn to this book because I was familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on the 5 stages of grief. And then David Kessler was working with her, and his book actually came out of his journey of loss of his son at the age of 21. And so I thought, okay, now here's somebody who not only has the background, but he's had the life experience that he has managed to journey through and then still be able to come out with something of benefit. And so I was grasping at straws. I don't mind saying so. And so I, fortunately, the funeral home that we worked through had some really good sessions on education on what's normal in grieving, because people often wonder, are they losing it? And so they were explaining what was so normal. And they were talking about these 5 stages and how they work and how sometimes they've been misinterpreted, that these 5 stages go in this orderly fashion. And, oh, I can't wait to get to number 5 because then all this pain will be over. But that was never really their intent. But that's how it got interpreted. And so, as we know, this grieving process, it doesn't necessarily go in that order. It may in the first place, but then it may rejig and it may show up and interspersed in other things. But having the reason I was so drawn to try and find some answers was that whole experience caused me to rethink all the things that I thought were true. And they didn't feel true anymore. And what was I to do? And I had the loss of a child. I was just calculating, it was 46 years ago next month.
Wow.
And in those days, none of this was available.
That's right.
And so in hindsight, I realized a lot of my grief got stuck.
Yes.
And it was years really battling it. Well, there's that battle word. We're going to go to war, right? But, I struggled with it and it would resurface here and there. And I thought, this time, this is not going to happen. I'm going to walk this journey differently. And I'm going to come out of it whole again, no matter what it takes. So that's what drew me to this.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that story. I think that I was also open to the book because I think we read it earlier this year, and my
Mm-hmm.
brother had died about 6 months before, and a year and a half before my niece had died, and she was only 37. And like you, I was just trying to figure out how to deal with grief in a healthy way, and not
Mm-hmm.
not to just leave it. But also, when my niece died, I was really paying attention to how we approach other people when they are grieving.
Yeah.
Because my brother and his wife, my brother and sister-in-law, like how could I talk to them? And so I had started on that journey as well of not only my own grief, but how do I support other people in their grief? So for me, this book was very timely. And now, 10 months later, in the meantime, my son has died. And so all of this reading and going back to the book has really been helpful for me. I'm just going to start crying.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Grief is not easy. And there are a couple interesting things about his book that, as I was reviewing, that really spoke to me. And one of them was that it's my job to honor my grief. No one else can understand my grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think about, my brother and his wife. I can't understand what they're going through. All I can do is be present to it. And then the other thing that really helped me was grief does not grow smaller,
Yeah.
but we grow bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that reading this book and really looking at that sixth stage, which is growth. The six stages are somewhere. I have them written down. The six stages of growth of grief. As Kubler-Ross set them out, and I thought I had them written, but they're somewhere
I
here.
think
Anyway, go ahead.
shock, disbelief, denial, and the
Anger,
fifth one, anger,
and acceptance.
acceptance. Yeah.
And then the sixth being growth. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that growth can happen unless we really, as you are doing, Joanne, we pay attention to what is happening to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his book is really very good in terms of talking about the idea that we need to grow,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to, I guess, like, not the other thing he said is not to ask, well, why did they die? Because isn't that what we say? Why did they
Yeah.
die?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Kessler, it's like, well, why did they live?
Yeah.
Like, what did they bring into my life?
Mm-hmm.
Why? What was their legacy? And we are part
Mm-hmm.
of that legacy to
Yeah.
carry their story on. One of the best things that I learned after my niece died was to talk about her.
Yeah.
Because often people are afraid to talk about someone who has died. So every time I saw my brother and his wife, I would tell a story about my niece, because she lived
Yeah.
with me for about a year and a half in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell stories because we had great stories. We had great experiences together. And, I watched her just blossom. And so I was able to tell them stories that they
Mm-hmm.
may not have known
Yeah.
because it was in Toronto, it was with me, and they wouldn't
Yeah.
have that experience.
Yeah.
And that was always great, because then it just kind of lifted everyone. Yes, in the midst of the story, we were sad,
Yeah.
but
And
we
yeah,
remember.
I really can resonate with that. I'm this thing about using talking about the person using their name, because I remember I walk with my granddaughter's father, who's my son, on Sunday mornings as a way of healing for both of us. And at one point, maybe a year and a half later, he said, I really feel afraid that we're going to forget her, how she sounded and, how she looked. And so, but I know there's always that trepidation. What if we make someone cry? Well, tears are part of the healing. And this thing about stuffing them down and choking them down just leads to a sore throat and illness.
That's right.
And I must say, one of the things that this journey has taught me is a growth in capacity to be able to sit with someone else in their pain.
Yeah.
And I was just ever so grateful, Crystal, the day that we met at the coffee shop after your son passed, and that I actually felt strong enough to be present to you. And there lies the gift of connection, compassion, and those are things that I value a lot in life. And I think even if a person hasn't experienced a loss of someone close to them, I think it really behooves people to educate themselves on these things so that they can be present for others. It's because in that presence of being there for someone else comes the healing of us as well.
That's right. That's right.
It's
And
interesting that you're talking about, being present. There's awareness of that, but a lot of times, one of the things it says in this book that people are very uncomfortable being around someone who is grieving. They just want them to get over with, so they can feel comfortable again with that person. I remember when my girlfriend, she lost her husband. He was 39 years old. His daughter was just starting high school, and he died, just as she was starting in September. And people were getting tired of her talking about her late husband and why can't she move on? Well, I think it's really hard when someone dies young, harder still. Like for me as a friend, it really brought me in touch with my mortality for the first time and really got me thinking, people don't just die when they're elderly, people die when they're young as well. So, yeah, so people are very uncomfortable with it and, uncomfortable with talking about grieving and talking about death because they're afraid of it.
Well, and I'm going to jump to Pema Chodron because one of the reasons I chose this book, How We Live is How We Die, is because one of the things that I'm going to say drives me crazy is people say, well, if I die, it's like, well, you're going to die. It's like we're all going to die. Like that's just the reality. And there's this sense of if we don't talk about it, then it's not going to happen. Well, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we need to learn how to deal with it in a healthy way, as opposed to, well, it's like my mom is 95. She's going to die. I'm 72. I'm going to die. We're all going to die. So let's just face the fact that we're going to die. And Pema Chodron talks about that. And one of the wonderful things about her book is it's from a Buddhist perspective, but what I really love is she talks about bardos, and a bardo is a transition. And she talks about it specifically, the transition from life to death and that in-between phase. And I remember when my dad died, we were all at the nursing home. And I think we've lost touch with that transition time. However, Francis, my son who has just died a few months ago, He was there, and Francis suffered with schizophrenia, which I think he was also psychic. So he came to me. We were all there, like all the family that was in the area was there, and he was there. And so he said, Mom, Grandpa is still here. And I said, yeah, he's still here. His body is in that room, but yeah, he's here. He's just kind of hanging around, checking out what we're doing, making sure that we're putting the mass together the way he wants it and whatever. I said, he's here. And as soon as I said that to him, he just calmed right down. But he knew, like he was in touch with that in between time.
Mhm.
And one of the things that she has in her book is she talks about we're always going through beginnings and endings. It's like death is kind of the ultimate ending, but there are endings every day in our lives. And some
Mhm.
of them, I think of when I'm at the end of a vacation, I just start to cry because I'm going to miss the people and I'm waving goodbye. And it's like, that's like a death. It's like I'm grieving the separation that's going to occur. But every day, there are all kinds of bardos where we begin and we end.
Mhm.
That's what
Mhm.
life is about. It's beginnings and endings. But we have such a hard time with the ultimate ending, probably because we think, well, what's next? We just don't know. We just don't know.
Well, you were talking about the ending, like the Bardos is a time between death and rebirth. So it
Right.
really is an ending. It's just
A new
a new
beginning.
beginning. Yes,
That's
yes,
right. That's right. And I
yeah.
think that's what we miss. It's like even in our day to day, it's like being able to end something and see a new opportunity in the
Hmm.
ending. It's like, oh, now there's a space for something else to happen. I mean,
Hmm.
if I were to stay on vacation and just keep going, I'd get so bored.
Mhm.
There are all kinds of other things I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
miss. So it's like, okay, say goodbye to that and start this. I had a really interesting experience of the five stages of grief. It was back when I was in Africa, and we were leaving. We were leaving the school, and we weren't sure that we were going to ever come back to Africa. There was a possibility of a second contract coming up in another area. But I was saying to everyone, oh, goodbye. We'll see you again. I'll see you again. We'll meet again. And it was just like, la, 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 I'll meet again, totally denying the fact that I was leaving. And one of the teachers at the school, one of the Marianus brothers, came to me and he said, I want you to read this article. And it was like a 3 or 4 page article. And it was on the stages of grief, really put into the context of letting go and moving on to the next thing. Well, that just changed my whole perspective on leaving. I cried for the next 6 weeks because everyone I saw, I said goodbye. I may never see you again. And what I realized, if I did, it would be a gift. It would be an absolute gift to see them again. But if I didn't, we said our goodbyes. And it was the healthiest thing I could have done. I felt so much better. I wasn't holding on to something. I let it go. And when I got on that airplane, it was like, I'm starting the next phase of my life. But so often we're dragging something with us and we're not able to fully immerse ourselves into that next stage. So, yeah, you're
Yeah, that,
right, Jillian. It's that transition.
Yeah.
yeah, that's one
That
of the things
brings,
they talk about in the book is that life is constant transition.
yeah.
And yet we deny that and we try to hold on, even to bad habits, because we're really comfortable with them. But in order to get to have a good death, the whole idea around this book is how we live is how we die, is to be a better person, so that we can have a better death. And perhaps part of that is like a self-awareness
Mhm.
and asking these difficult questions of ourselves,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
processing um, things that happen in our life, and hopefully getting to a better end. I know when my father died back in, he was 99, I think, and it for me, it brought up a lot of, negative stuff because my childhood wasn't ideal. And it's interesting it came up at this time because at that time I was 40 and I was just started on a spiritual journey and I was feeling great. Everything was unfolding beautifully. I was happy. I felt like I'd really found my place. And then a year later, my dad dies, and now boom, like everything just shattered. And so I went into counseling to try and process all of this stuff. But my focus always was I wanted to get back to where I was. But it isn't about getting back, it's about moving forward.
Yeah.
And because of it, I came to realize that what had happened was probably a good thing because the foundation I was building this new spirituality on wasn't strong enough for what I wanted to build. And then I needed to build a new foundation. So that's what I learned from it. So I suppose that would go back to finding meaning in someone's death. I found that
Absolutely.
meaning. I built a stronger foundation for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing that Kessler talks about is that our brain is like Velcro. The bad stuff sticks. So when bad stuff, it's like it's all there. And then when good stuff happens, it's Teflon. It's like it's gone. And so needing to retrain our brain to really grab on to those positive experiences, and which helps us then in terms of dealing with pain and suffering. And, as I was reading it, I thought I didn't want people to get the impression that it was like a naive, like Pollyanna kind of thing, but rather our brain, we need to work with our brain. And there, that was another book that helped me was The Grieving Brain, because we have to work with our brain in order to understand our grief. So, but that's another conversation.
One of the other things that I really gained from Kessler's book was the appreciation of rituals and ceremonies in saying goodbye and for rebuilding. And because at one time prior to this whole experience, I used to say, sort of jokingly, but when I die, have me cremated, put my ashes in my kayak and shoot me down some really nice river, and I'll be totally fine. And I was cool with that. But having gone through this experience and observing the rituals and the ceremony that went with it, it really caused me to rethink that idea of really honoring the impact that someone's life has had and adding a level of dignity and respect to it. So much so that following that, although my husband and I had talked for years about we really should make our arrangements, we did, in fact, within the first year after we said, we'll never let the children have to deal with this. We've seen how difficult that is. Let's take that off of them. So we went and sat down and figured everything out. And it's all neatly packaged, probably with some modifications, but it really got me to think about this concept of celebrating the life that has been and how to honor that, to help, because really the leaving is for those that are left behind. The one who has left, they're just fine.
That's right.
And it took me back to having gone to a young gal's funeral when my son was in grade 8 and one of his classmates died very suddenly. And the most touching thing that stuck with me was the priest said, this is how this transition goes. We're standing on the shore, and it's like the sailboat goes out and everyone on the shore goes waving goodbye. But on the other side, those that have moved on before are saying, here she comes, here she comes. And I thought that was so beautiful. And that's how I pictured my granddaughter and all the people that had gone before that would welcome her.
Yeah.
And so that thing about, is she okay? All of that was kind of answered. I knew she was in better shape than we were.
Right.
So anyway, that appreciation for ceremony and ritual, I think, is something fairly valuable, especially when we live in a society that is so disposable, you
Yes.
know.
Yes. Yes. Like you, Joanne, John and I were the same. It's like, just cremate me and just get rid of those ashes. And what we realized is, even with Francis, we weren't going to do anything, and then we thought, well, maybe we should do something. Well, it was so healing for us because we had just our experience of him over the last 3 years was that he lived on the street and he would take street drugs. He wasn't taking his antipsychotic drugs. It was a really not a good experience for us. And
Yeah.
and during the celebration of life, we heard story after story after story of how he was loved, how kind he was, how funny he was, how intelligent he was, how respectful he was. It just changed. It changed the picture for me. It changed the
Yeah.
story. And I needed to have the story changed.
And we got to witness that.
Mm,
We witnessed that. That's exactly.
yeah. Yeah. It was amazing. So the rituals are so, so important. And just a couple of weeks ago, some people in Toronto gathered for him as well. And there was another celebration. And the same, it was, all these great stories, all these great memories of him. So, yeah, the rituals, we have so many rituals when people are born. We bring
Yeah.
them into life and it's wonderful, but we we don't always think through the rituals. Like one of the things that we did, like we didn't have him at a funeral home because we thought the people that he associates with would not be comfortable there. So where do we celebrate? And so we were at like a street church kind of place, and it was perfect. And I thought he would be totally comfortable here, just with Tim Hortons coffee and donuts. That's what he would want. And so
Yeah.
it's thinking about, okay, he doesn't really care, but really, what is the best way to celebrate his life? So yeah, celebration is so important. So important.
Like, I think, generally speaking, in our culture, death is not something that people want to talk about, and it's uncomfortable and so on. But I think part of the acceptance is to accept that life goes in cycles.
Mm.
And
Mm.
always made sense to me that, as you said, the joy that permeates the family when the person arrives, does it not make sense that when they leave, there would be the same degree only of sorrow and sadness?
Right.
So it's a capacity thing, but it's natural.
Yes.
But we live and I can speak for this. I love to be in charge and to control almost everything that I can.
Right.
But I am really working on that, this illusion of control.
Yeah.
And this denial of death doesn't really help people prepare for their exit.
That's right.
And my sister is a nurse, and she worked with elderly people who were, some of them, ready to die and wanted to die, but their family members kept saying, oh no, do this, do that, like save them, save them. So it meant that their loved one didn't have anybody safe to talk about how they felt about leaving, because the rest of the family wouldn't give them permission to go.
That's right.
And you often see that they either pass on when the family's not in the room, or when the family finally comes to that stage where they can allow them to leave, they leave.
Yeah, that's right.
So we really, really need to brush up on this. And if I could add a couple of things on the whole idea of the grief, there's another book that if anyone's really searching right now, it's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. And maybe you can see that. And just recently, he and Anderson Cooper did a podcast together, and Anderson was talking about his deep loss of his father and his brother and his mother. And it was just beautiful. The little clip, I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing. And also, I found the book, How We Live is How We Die, really a difficult read for me because there was a lot of language that I wasn't familiar with and so on. But the other book that I read related to this is called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And it has that same sort of theme in it, but that idea of accepting life on life's terms. That's what I got out of that. It was certainly worth the struggle to read through it. And it really, really, I found helpful. And this radical acceptance doesn't just apply to the idea of loss, but of the many things that pop up in life. And the pain we cause ourselves is in the resistance and the fighting against it.
That's right.
Instead of, what was the term here? Meet whatever happens with cheerfulness and grace.
Yeah.
And that's acceptance.
Yeah.
And the other is that these life experiences we have on this journey become the gift we get to give to someone else, because we can have some sense of what they're walking because we've been there. And so in a way that honors our loved one too, is this greater capacity for compassion.
Well, and Chodron says that it's not impermanence that causes us to suffer. It's our grasping of permanence that causes us to suffer. It's like, I want life to stay the same. Well, it doesn't. It just, time moves on and everything changes every moment. And it's just being able to really trust that life is unfolding as it should. Yeah. Well, I think Joanne or Jillian, I think Jillian, you told me that Maria Shriver has started a book club, a nonfiction book club. So I wonder if she knows about us.
I'm sure she got inspiration. She heard us thinking about it.
She must have. It's that thing where if somebody thinks about it somewhere else, many other places, people are thinking the same thing. So that's great. Well, I think that this is a good transition to our next podcast, because we're going to be talking to Marcy Lane, who has written a book called A Mercy of Widows. Now, again, in our nonfiction book club, here's a book of fiction. However, Marcy writes about MAID, medically assisted dying, which she has experienced, and we're going to talk to her about that and about why she wrote it in a fiction book as opposed to more of a memoir. So we are going to have Marcy join us, so that will be a great conversation. And thank you to you all. Thank you all. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Jillian. And thank you, all our listeners. I hope you have been able to take something away today. Perhaps you'll buy one of the books, or you'll just take a little tidbit that will help you be more aware and help you to access your own wisdom. So stay tuned to our next podcast when we actually have a guest with us. Until then, have a great day and a great week. Bye-bye.